This is Tales from the Pros, where business leaders and influencers share their stories of inspiration, struggles, and successes. And I'm your host, Michael Giorgio.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to Tales from the Pros. And this is Michael Giorgio, your host and co-founder of Imaginovation. Our guest with me here today is James Avery, who is the founder of AdsERK here in Durham, North Carolina, which is geared towards user-first sites and apps looking to drive revenue without sacrificing the user experience. AdsERK is a cloud API platform for building integrated native ads and sponsored listings. Unlike creating an ad platform from scratch, which essentially could take years, their APIs enable developers to create one in just a few weeks. James, thanks so much for being with me here today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So, James, what really caught my attention, before reaching out to you to be on this podcast was I saw your company AdsERK on TechCrunch, and I also saw how you made it to the next level with the help of Reddit, which I thought was really, really cool. And I saw you guys made it to Inc. magazine's top 500 best companies list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So yeah, I mean, we started working with Reddit all the way back in 2012, and one of the interesting things with them was originally when we started out, we were really focused on traditional banner ads, which you see all over the web, which are really kind of pretty static, pretty annoying to most users. And we started working with Reddit in that regard as well. We started working with their team to serve their banner ads, but we quickly kind of found out that they had been working on this native unit. That was a sponsored link. So, at the top of the Reddit page, there's a sponsored link that you can see that's like a real Reddit item. You can upvote it, downvote it, you can save it, you can leave comments on it. And they were, serving these as advertisements. Yeah, it's a paid link. It's a paid link, but it's a real link on Reddit, right? So, a company could come in and do a post about, this is a new car we have, or this is a software product, and then they could promote that link. Mm-hmm. And what's compelling about that is that it's actually built into Reddit in the way that a user uses Reddit, as opposed to a banner ad on the right or something like that. Mm-hmm. They're actually, it's integrated into the flow. And so when we started talking to them, we realized, hey, like this is the kind of unit, like this is what we think makes the internet a better place. Not banner ads, but these really integrated, high quality units. And so what we did was we built an API so that they could use our back end, our decision engine and our pacing engine and reporting. They could use all of that while they essentially, still run this very integrated ad. So, traditional banner ads are like some JavaScript you throw on a page. Like our API allowed them to really run these integrated ads using our API. And that started back in like 2012, 2013. And it was kind of an experiment at the time, right? We were like, let's build this API. It should work. We can get Reddit to use it. That'd be really cool. But we didn't realize that was going to become the focus of our business, is that enabling other companies to use our API to build those same sort of like integrated native or sponsored listings for e-commerce sites or anything that's really kind of a more effective, better way to do advertising, as opposed to just standard like pre-roll and video and stuff like that.
So it was like Reddit was kind of like a proof of...
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they were already a customer, and so they were kind of a willing, participant in this experiment. And it really helped us kind of solidify that as a way forward for the company.
That's awesome. So, I noticed you guys had a lot of growth. You started in
so we started. So it's kind of a long story, but essentially, AdsERK really started in 2010, 2011. Before that, I had been running a couple of small ad networks, which was kind of the initial version of AdsERK. Before that, but AdsERK really, we like to say 2011. You can really, one of those things where it's, you could pick any number of dates for when it started.
Yeah, that's cool. And how did you guys really make it to? I know Inc. 500 is not easy to get. I mean, you got to definitely be growing pretty quickly. Do they base it off of revenue or number
yeah? So it's
of people,
based off of. Sorry to cut you off. It's based off of your growth over 3 years. So part of it is timing. Like you have to be above. I think the revenue has to be above a certain amount. I don't remember the exact numbers the first year, and then 3 years down the road, it's based on the percentage growth of that revenue over the 3 years. And so, we basically could look at 2011 to 2014, which I think the years were. Maybe it was 2012 to 2015. And we grew tremendously then, right? I mean, we went from kind of a really small company with a couple customers to, a company with a lot more customers and millions in revenue. So because we had that kind of that spurt of initial growth that was really, really good, that gave us a really, really great percentage growth, which put us at like 200 and something in the Inc. 500, which was a lot of fun. It's fun to do that and kind of get your name on there. We haven't kept doing it, not because, our growth has still been good, but I just kind of feel like it's that first year where you can get kind of in the top couple hundred is really worth it. And there's kind of diminishing returns of dealing with it after that, I think.
That's cool, man. Yeah. I mean, congrats about that. That's awesome. I love seeing local companies doing really well. And, like I said, me and you talked before, it's a lot of hard work, and I understand the grind. It's crazy stuff, man. So it must have definitely been worth it. So that's cool. So I want you to tell people, James, really what is ad tech or digital advertising, and how is it essentially impacting marketing and sales in today's generation? Because from what I see your platform, what you guys have done, you're creating another opportunity for publishers and e-commerce companies to
absolutely.
Make more money.
I mean, we've kind of all with the internet, right? So internet is created, everybody loves it. There's lots of free content. There's lots of information available, more so than ever before. And kind of early on in the internet, advertising became the core mode of making money. Some people regret that now, but I think one of the beautiful things about advertising is that anybody who has access to the internet can get to all this information, this huge wealth of information without paying anything. So you can go to the library and read about whatever you want on a computer, even if you don't have the internet at home or have a computer at home. And advertising makes a lot of that possible. You can have a site that's free because it's making this money through advertising. And what started out as very simple. The initial banner ads were put a banner ad on a page and put an image on the page and you're done, has gotten exceedingly complex. So ad tech today, is dominated by people like Google and Facebook and Amazon. And then there's lots of other third-party players, but they're doing real-time auctions. So, anytime you go to and so you have these real-time auctions, right? And that facilitated things like hyper-targeting, so they can retarget people who went to their website that happen to live in North Carolina that have a net worth of X and that recently test drove a Ford, and they can do a lot of incredible targeting. And there's a lot of data concerns with that as well, right? I mean, as we're seeing with issues that Facebook's run into with Cambridge Analytica stuff and things like that, you're seeing that people are starting to realize how much data is being collected about them in the ad tech world. So ad tech it's a pretty big industry. I mean, there's a lot of companies in ad tech. There's a lot of money made in ad tech, but it's also something that's it's exceedingly dominated by a handful of major players, though, and kind of Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did you guys see that there was, what was really the motive behind building AdsUrks API platform? Because, there, like you just said, right, there were some really big players in the industry like Google who, we'll talk about in a little bit, but what was really the drive and motive behind
we kind of stumbled into it. So I think I alluded to it earlier, but I was running a couple of ad networks. And this was back when I was a consultant. So I was basically a software engineering consultant. I'd go in and help companies run these kind of big projects. And then I kind of stumbled into running these couple of small ad networks, like really kind of hyper targeted towards developers. It was towards .NET developers and Ruby developers. Mm-hmm. And as I was running those networks, I kind of realized, hey, there's some tools out here for me, but none of them were great. A lot of them were kind of ancient software, and which really wasn't that old, but it felt really old, right? Like it's stuff that was written in the early 2000s, and this is the late 2000s, which is ancient, like software wise. And so I decided to write my own. And so the first version of AdsERK was just a ad server that was built to run vertical ad networks, like what I was running. And then as we started to kind of sell it, like one of our first customers was Stack Overflow. As we started to sell it, I realized, hey, like this software product is much more compelling than an ad network. And that's when it kind of took off. And when we started focusing on selling the software, I sold off the the networks, which was kind of our first kind of, super seed kind of early investment. Was the money from that sale was able to put that into AdsERK. But I think, it's one of those times where like ignorance is bliss, where I think if I'd sat down and thought about the people we're about to compete with, then we might not have done it. But this was also, 2010, 2011. So, Google hadn't yet, really recommitted themselves to DoubleClick. They'd bought DoubleClick, but they hadn't rebuilt it yet the way they have now. Facebook was nowhere near the powerhouse they are now. Yeah. And, in the kind of digital advertising space, Twitter didn't even or barely existed. Like Twitter had only been around a couple years. So it was a different landscape back then. And then really the original idea that we went into, didn't work out really at all. Like from a sense of kind of just being a display ad server, we quickly found that we had to differentiate ourselves from these big guys. And that's really where the API and the custom formats comes in.
That's cool. And that's, James, this is what I love, man. In all honesty, like when I read about you guys and your story and just about AdsERK in general, I knew that there was a lot of competitors in your space, and you remind me a little bit of myself because we started in 2011, and the economy when you guys started, right? Economy wasn't good, and there was a lot of it was just hard to start a business, right? It was hard to get funding. It was very difficult, and you guys were kind of in a, I wouldn't say oversaturated space, but you were in a very competitive space. And when we started our company, right, Imagine Innovation, we were in a very competitive space, building software and apps and things like that. And we went ahead and did it. We weren't scared of the competition, and that's why that's why I think, to me at least, I consider you a leader in your space because it seems like you have no fear. And I love that. And that's really the people I'm interviewing for this podcast, is people who have no fear, people who just go out and do it, and they work hard. They're not afraid of the competition. They're not afraid of anything really. They just go out and do it, and they believe in what they're doing. And that's what I really want to talk to you about here is, I know it's really hard starting a tech company organically. And, that's how we did it. But I noticed you guys received a few rounds of funding over the years. What was that process like?
So when we started out originally, I was kind of funding it from consulting and things like that. And then we quickly realized that to really scale it, we were going to need to raise some money. We already had some customers. We had revenue. That revenue was basically paying for hosting, and we kind of had one employee it was paying salary for. I wasn't taking a salary. Had another guy who wasn't taking a salary. We quickly realized we needed to raise some money.
For how long did that go for? How many years were you not taking salary?
It wasn't that many years. I mean, because I had the ad networks and things like that that were providing revenue. So really, it was only about 6 or 7 months. I think I didn't take a salary. But yeah, so that was in 2011 was when we really started doing that. And I could have I basically could have paid myself, but instead we hired another engineer to help kind of accelerate development and keep not taking a salary. But eventually, had to pay myself a salary at some point. And also, we really wanted to grow things. We wanted to hire more engineers. We wanted to hire in sales and support. And so we started going out looking to raise money. Originally we were looking to raise more, and we eventually settled on, I think our first round was $650K, kind of a tiny seed round by today's terms, but like an average seed round probably for back then. And it was, I think raising money is always a slog. Like there's some people I think that get lucky and raise money overnight, but anytime I've had to do it, it's always been, it's a sales game. It's talking to 50 people to get the 5 or 10 you need to get a round done, or talking to 100 people,
and getting one.
Yeah. I mean, and once you have the lead, everything else falls into place, right? Once you have somebody who's committed that initial amount, like I think, we had people commit, I think it was 250K as like the lead. And then, we quickly filled up the rest of the round. And it was originally going to be a 500K round. And then we ended up increasing it because it could raise more money. So we went from we wanted to raise like 2 million down to like 500K back up to like 650. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's always. I think it's one of the things that people still underestimate to these days is how hard it is to separate people from their money, right? Whether it's investment or paying for a product or buying a product or donating, it's still the hardest thing out there is getting someone to believe in your idea enough to write a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars is no easy task.
Do you think it's less risky to seek an investor rather than go get a loan, maybe from the small business SBA, or even, I mean, there's a lot of crowdfunding. There's all these other methods of raising money, right? But what are your thoughts about that? You think it's better to?
I think it all depends on what you're doing. I think that things like Kickstarter are amazing if you have a physical product. Because that's what they're really built for. They're not built for. I've never seen somebody try to kickstart like an enterprise sales product. Like something you're selling to enterprises. You're almost always you're kickstarting a board game or a food product, or even you can even kickstart stuff that has that's like research oriented or that's benefiting individuals. That's all kinds of stuff. You can kickstart all kinds of stuff as long as you can find a lot of people who are willing to pay $50 or $100. It doesn't work with like enterprise software or even any kind of SaaS software. And then when it comes to like SBA loans and bank loans in general, they still don't really get the idea of SaaS software. I mean, like when you're creating something like this, you don't have any physical assets, right? They understand like, hey, you want to borrow $300,000 to start a dry cleaner because you need to buy the dry cleaning equipment, you need to, rent a space, and you need to upfit the space, and and they know how to model that. If you go to them and say, I want to write some software for 6 months, and then people are going to give me $100 a month for it, they have no model for that. So I think if you're writing software, the only way I still think the only way to do it is to either have enough personal capital that you can bankroll yourself and a couple people for 6 to 12 months, or to go raise money to do that. And I'm still a big believer in small rounds. I mean, you can build a lot of stuff for $500,000 nowadays, even way more than we did. We're able to back then, just because of all the cloud computing and the stuff that Amazon provides and the tools out there. It's really pretty amazing how far you can make that money go if you're careful. And I think that's the way to go. And I think that's really the only option for software. People talk about, there's like ICOs and there's crowdfunding and things like that. But I think it's pretty tough. Whereas I feel like if you have the experience and you've, maybe done it before, you have experience in the vertical, you can go raise small rounds pretty quickly. It's not easy, but like people do it.
I like that. It's like little micro rounds. So yeah, it's good because you notice that a lot of these startups, they're always seeking the really, really large investments. And when we're on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, you always hear about, oh, this company raised 5 million, 10 million bucks, or even 50 million or whatever it is. But that's really rare. You don't see a lot of companies raising that kind of money off the bat. I think the micro rounds is really smart because it helps you to be more efficient. And I don't mean, you talked a little bit about efficiency, right? Starting up from nothing, you have to be efficient because we're not.
Absolutely. And I think too, the small rounds help avoid what we like to call playing house, which is when you get into the mode of you spend too much time on the mechanics of now you have a company as opposed to the core goal of like building a product, and I think it's really hard. It's a trap that is easy to fall into when you start hiring people that, I think early on, like you should basically have developers or salespeople, like that's it. And when you start hiring other jobs and other positions and VPs of business development and things like that, like you're getting way ahead of yourself. And if you only have 500K, like you don't do that, right? Like you can't afford to do that. Or you start getting too much into what your benefits packages are and things like that. And I think we're all guilty of that a little bit. But I think the focus needs to be on just building that product and getting traction. And that's all that matters early on. The other thing I'll say too is that I think that accelerators are still I mean, like accelerators are a great place to go if you don't even have a product yet, like if you've built nothing, or you have a very small product like Y Combinator and Techstars, and these guys, are built to get you to that place where you could then go raise money. And they help teach you to be lean. They're focused on being lean. They keep you out of that, playing house syndrome, because they're providing some of the tools you need. They're kind of keeping you focused. If I was doing it all over again, I would have applied to Y Combinator and Techstars as step number one.
Yeah, and I think planning and patience with all startups plays a big role, and we'll talk a little bit about that, how that played a role in your guys' success. But I mean, so do you feel that, James? Do you feel that funding was really needed for AdsERK, or do you think you could have grown it organically? You think? I mean, obviously, right? If you grow organically, it probably grows slower, or do you think it wouldn't have?
Yeah,
lasted?
I think the main benefit that raising money gave us was, I think a lot of starting a company is experiments, right? Like kind of that lean startup mentality of like, what hypothesis are you testing? Raising money helped us figure out what we needed to be doing. Like it got us to where we had a hypothesis that we'd proven around, the API and native and sponsored listings. Whereas I think if we hadn't raised money, there would always been that moment of, well, is the issue that we don't have money? Is the issue that we can't hire the salesperson? Is the issue that we can't do, X or Y? And I think it would have taken us a lot longer to get to that point. I think you can always do it without raising money. Like we could have done it without raising money, but it would have taken us a lot longer to get where we are, I think. And especially I think it would have been harder to figure out that, hey, we put a lot of resources against this and it's not working. That's the problem is that this isn't going to work. As opposed to, the problem being, we're not, we don't have enough resources. And so I think it kind of takes out an equation that you could, kind of falsely apply as the reason something's not working.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, the money that you guys raise, it seems like you put most of it in just hiring the most skillful and efficient people, right, to excel your company, and also your technology stack too, right? To make sure that you're staying.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays you shouldn't be spending money on anything other than people, like early on, right? Like anything else, if you're spending a bunch of money on it, like it's not a good idea. It should just be hiring engineers and salespeople or marketing. Like those are really only ways you should be spending that early money. And we've actually been really capital efficient. I mean, we've only raised about a little bit over $1.5 million over the course of AdsERK. We've been profitable for multiple years now. And continue to grow. So, we didn't really get on that VC wagon of, A, B, C, D, E and keep raising money and doubling down. We raised some money, we found something that worked, and we realized we can grow it, kind of sufficiently without raising a bunch more money.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And the thing is that when you raise so much money, you notice a lot of these companies, they end up paying themselves these crazy salaries. And you ever watch Shark Tank, right? You always you see Mark Cuban asking them like, all right, so what's your salary? And they're like, well, $300,000. They're like, okay, $300,000 your salary, and you guys raised $2 million?
I know the people that invested in us would have never let me do that. So I don't know what their investors are doing to allow them to take that. I don't make anywhere near $300,000 now as a profitable company. So.
Amen, brother. Amen. So, I mean, you guys are in a competitive space, right, James? I mean, you're ad tech, digital advertising. You got some huge players we talked about. I mean, Google is in your space. Did you guys ever feel threatened from them? Or you just kind of felt, you know what, they're already in the space. I mean, they can't really harm us now. We're just going to do our best to compete. How did you guys really how do you really differentiate yourselves from it? Is it more like
I mean, we kind of had to figure out that, Google, like when we tried to sell a traditional display ad server, we could not compete with Google. And we learned that. Like, sure, we carved out customers here and there. Like, you can always do that. You can always find customers that you have a feature that they need that Google doesn't have, or you're willing to do something that Google isn't.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really a viable business. We had to go towards the API route and helping publishers really build their own systems. And the reason that we can do that and that we don't think Google will get into that is because it's not fundamentally scalable in the way that Google would need it to be. right? So we're helping a publisher build a kind of bespoke native product that can be very profitable for that publisher. But what Google needs to have things that can be run across 70% of the internet, and where McDonald's can come to them and spend $1 billion, or whatever on ads and run that across their whole network. And so we really had to find this piece that is like, the opposite of what Google is able to do. Google has to build things. Well, they can be customized and they can, be native in quotes, like they can be kind of native. They have to have a broad enough, part of the internet that they can apply to, that they can never be as unique as what we can do. And so really we kind of found the one like niche that we can live in, that, where we can sign people, and that, Google's not going to compete with us there. So yeah, I mean, I think when you're competing, there's no sense in trying to go head to head with Google, right? I mean, they're massive. But as with, right, this is always the case, right? There's always spaces that they don't want to or can't compete in because it's not, it's not, not compatible with their business model.
So Google doesn't offer the custom ad solutions like you guys do, right? It seems like you guys are more
I mean, so we're not custom in that, right? We don't build software custom for people, but we enable them to do that. And the big difference is that it's scalable in a way that, it's not scalable in the sense that Google would need it to be, right? That it could go across the whole web. But it's great for us because it's helping this individual publisher or e-commerce site build a really compelling solution for their customers.
So what platforms are your APIs, can they be on any platform? Like what platform do you guys work on? I mean, where does the API?
Yeah. I mean, people can call us from anywhere. We have people that use us in iPhone, Android apps. We have podcasts that use us to dynamically insert ads and stream them into their podcast streams. We have people use us on the web. We've had somebody trying us out on like displays, like in train stations and things like that. So you can use this API anywhere that you have connection to the internet, right? So it's exceedingly flexible.
That's cool. Huh. Yeah, I mean, I like it how that you guys are not really trying to compete with Google. You kind of know what you guys do, your competitors, you're not really trying to compete with the biggest player. You're trying to just be yourself and not really making excuses and not being fearful, not really fearing them. You're just trying to be yourselves, and I think you guys know your audience. And it's pretty cool that, with you guys having this ad platform, you can really, I mean, you're probably providing a lot of reporting and analytics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Too, and right? I think it's interesting too to think about, like, it's, we still compete with Google in a sense that, a publisher has an option to just throw banner ads on their site and take the check that Google sends them. Yeah. Or they can put in extra work and build something that's, that can generate a lot more revenue and be a lot better for their users. So we compete with them in that sense, like we're in the same sort of space, like, in the same kind of way where you look at, like Tom's shoes, right? It's like, are they competing with Nike? Well, sure. Like, I'm going to buy shoes and I might buy Nike or I might buy Tom's, but they're, incredibly different value propositions and incredibly different products. So in the same, like, we compete with Google in that same sense, right? Like, we're, Tom's isn't going to become as big as Nike, but they've carved out a really good niche that is, really profitable and has done really well for them. And I think of us in that way as well, where we're providing something that's much more unique and much more compelling for certain publishers and e-commerce sites. But yeah, Google is probably going to serve more ads than we do because they apply to the whole general public, websites out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, so James, like, over the years, I mean, building a technology company and product is really difficult. There's a lot of grinding. I mean, you're talking about, the typical 12 to 15 hours a day, or at least, the first few years trying to build the foundation of the company. What were some of the hardest obstacles that you guys faced? Was it harder, for example, getting the product completed and out of beta? Or was it harder now competing in the space and trying to drive more revenue? Like, what were some of the toughest challenges you guys faced in the whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, the early stuff was easier just in the sense because it was much more about just writing code and getting a product out. When it starts to collide with a customer is when you kind of an idea comes into contact with reality, is when things get harder. But I think really it's all hard. I think it's like it's really we probably look back with rose tinted glasses and think that things were easier back then, but I guarantee back then we thought they were pretty hard. So I don't think there is an easy part. I think it's all hard, but it's all, it's why we do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, I always tell people this. People with startups always ask me, is it hard? Is it easier in the beginning? And I'm like, yeah, it is. But I mean, the thing is, it's hard to say. I feel it gets harder, right? As you grow, you have to learn how to scale the company, right? You have to learn how to manage employees. You got to learn how to be a leader. What are your thoughts on that? On just in leadership and hiring the right people and scaling and processes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that the reason it feels like it gets harder is because it's pushing ourselves into a different skill set. A buddy of mine who had started the company said that, he had the most fun up until about 30 people. And when they hit the 40 or 50 person part, he said, like, I'm basically just in human resources now. Like, I'm just dealing with hiring people and dealing with, issues between the different employees and something's not working and how do we deal with so-and-so. And it becomes much more of that than it is early on. It's, talk to customers, work on product, ship product, talk to customers, work on product, ship product. And so I don't know that it's easier or harder. If you talk to somebody who's kind of a seasoned operator, the early part is probably a lot harder for them because, they're dealing with, stuff they're not as familiar with. Whereas once it gets to 50 people, they're kind of comfortable. Like that's where they operate. So I think, when you get pushed into something you're not experienced with, it's going to be harder or seem harder. But, I think it's all hard.
How do you guys really stay efficient internally? Is it just a lot of the tools that you guys use? Like there's, for example, a tool is, the Atlassian products, right? Like Jira or Confluence. Those tools really help efficiency. At least for us, it helps us a lot. I'm sure you guys use a lot of tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think tools can help.
Right?
I think sometimes tools get in the way. And sometimes I think we push for tools that actually make our jobs harder. We actually just we only use Trello for software development, which sometimes makes our lives harder, but we've done Jira and stuff like that in the past too, and it felt like too much. But to me, I think a lot of it is about really trying to automate things where we can automate them, especially when it comes to software and how we have things deployed and how how our systems work. Really like focusing on what we can, outsourcing what we can outsource. We don't outsource software development, but we use Amazon for pretty much everything. When we can use an Amazon tool instead of building it ourselves, we do that. That helps us, get a lot of leverage on, not building our own, databases or hosting our own data centers and, using their products instead of writing it our own. Like we gain a lot of efficiency there.
What about in terms of like documentation? As a software company, essentially, right? You need to have things documented. And I'm not just talking about on the software tech piece. I'm talking about just in terms of how things work between your employees, like processes for how you guys are going to implement a new marketing or sales campaign, or processes. Do you guys document things internally? You just kind of do them? Or because I think a lot of companies are different. I've seen some small companies that are incredibly efficient. They're very documentation oriented in regards to their processes. And I've seen some big companies that, at least ones we've worked with, that weren't really that organized. Like they didn't have that much documentation. They just kind of did things.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that we, early on, of course, nothing's documented. We've gotten a lot better about that along the way. And I think you also end up with people in the company who you have to find the right people that are really good at being connectors. For instance, we have a QA guy named Alex. I'll have to edit that out. A QA guy named Alex. Testing guy who does a really great job of being this like interface between product and engineering and support. And he's that guy who he knows what's been deployed. He knows what's what's in progress. He knows where something is. He kind of becomes a super connector inside the company, and that becomes really valuable. And I think those kind of guys are, pretty great at doing that and helping keep the company efficient. Because otherwise, like the thing you can lose is once you have multiple teams, right? Like the communication between those teams becomes a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the companies I've spoken to, they said resolving a lot of the issues internally is really just communication, because you know how you guys have sales, you got engineering, you got development, you got all these HR, right? You got all these different departments internally, and in order to resolve, or even just, I think even just to scale, is just increasing communication between each department. It's making sure everyone's on the same page. I'm assuming you guys probably do that too. Just making sure that you're all on the same page and having meetings and
totally. And I think that's really where, like, when you start to scale more and more, like that becomes more and more of the issue, right? It's the communication between teams. And that's where I think like there is such value in like a super connector, and there's values in documentation and things like that. And I think Slack has changed a lot of that too, right? Like it's a lot easier to get kind of, Slack has its issues, right? Like Slack sometimes can make it really hard to work. But for the people whose job it is to kind of know what's going on, like Slack does an incredible job of, I can sit in this channel and just kind of see stuff scroll by and catch up with it when I can. And I have a good idea of what's going on with this certain team. Whereas that would be a lot harder if, I was being CC'd on emails or they were having all these conversations in person. So I think, it's easier now than it ever was before to kind of keep in touch between teams.
Yeah, love it. So, James, I mean, you understand that tech is booming. We all understand it's growing at a really rapid rate, almost too rapid. I was actually I went to Best Buy the other day, and it was crazy, man. Like you just see all these new products.
Oh, you're the one. Man, you're the one that went to Best Buy.
Yeah. I'm the one who went to Best Buy. Yeah, I always shop online. I usually, shop Amazon, but I went in there just kind of, I'm looking to get a new computer or whatnot. But I was getting some quotes. But it's crazy. You just see all these new products coming out, and you can't compete. It's so hard to even compete. Obviously, physical products, but you need software with the hardware, right? And that's where IoT has. Well, it's already been around, but that's emerging, and artificial intelligence, and you're hearing about crypto and just all these emerging technologies. And so how you guys in the digital advertising space, how are you staying within technology? Are you coming, are you in the engineering team and development teams, are you guys kind of just thinking about what's coming up in the future? How are you guys staying competitive in the market? What are you doing in your space to stay competitive and making sure that you're not,
I think it's interesting because I think, technology does grow exponentially, and we're seeing all this incredible stuff around, AI and machine learning and IoT and things like that. But also a lot of it stays the same, right? Like a lot of it's just the core tenets of building a good API that does what people need. Sure, the back end of that changes and the maybe the technology is changing, but the core fundamentals of it are the same. And so, as we add in more things like, machine learning and things like that, they're just improving algorithms that were already there. And so a lot of that hasn't changed. I mean, and like the core ideas behind machine learning are from like the 70s, right? So while it seems to be moving really fast, it's also not moving as fast as people sometimes think it is. And AI is largely just a made up word for a lot of people right now, or it's machine learning is now AI, but machine learning is its own thing and it's been around for a long time. So I think it's always a challenge to keep up, and there's always a lot going on, but it's always important to remember that the key thing is providing value, and in solving a problem for your customers, and that doesn't change.
So what do you see, what technologies do you really see emerging? I mean, are there any ones that you see that are up and coming and any ones that you see dying? I mean, I guess up and coming, we kind of talked about it, right? It's, AI and, and VR, AR, but what do you see in regards to like anything that's dying?
No, I mean, I think the old stuff doesn't really die, right? It just gets relegated to a smaller role. So things that were, things like, Dynamo and things like that were really big kind of innovations 10, 15 years ago are now just, everybody can use them, right? Like a high performance key value store and things like that. Like these just become table stakes now for how you're building stuff. So I don't see that it dies off. It just becomes part of what we're doing, right? I mean, we were all really excited about semiconductors at one point. And it's not that they've died off. It's just that we take it for granted now, right? So I think the same thing's happening. Like I don't see stuff dying off, and I think a lot of the new technologies too. I mean, a lot of it's it goes through a hype cycle, and so it gets really exciting, and the blockchain and crypto is taking off, and it's going crazy, and it's going to solve everything. And I mean, I think we're still years away from it solving a lot of real world problems, and I do think it will solve a lot of real world problems. And I'm pretty bullish on the blockchain in general. But it's still in a very early stage, and we probably are aware of these things in an earlier stage than we ever have been before, right? Like it took longer for something to bubble up before, whereas now like we see it a lot earlier. And the same with AI, AI has come a long way, but there's all these different sections of AI that we're kind of lumping AI into, and where things that like machine learning, which are fairly mature in some ways, but still have a long way to go. And then there's genetic algorithms, and there's computer vision, which we've seen come a long way recently with the kind of driving stuff. So there's lots of pieces to this, and it's all exciting, and we're going to keep see it growing, but it's all it's all going to augment what we're doing now. Like, a lot of this stuff isn't going to totally change anything unless somebody builds like an actual, true AI that's self-learning, and then we're all kind of in trouble.
Code that builds itself.
Yeah.
Code that builds code. Yeah, I saw this commercial. I think it was Microsoft. And it was Common, the rapper or the actor, and he had this it was pretty cool, man. It was really inspiring because people get threatened when you say AI or machine learning. They think of Terminator, right? They think of what's that
Skynet.
Terminator. Skynet. That's it. And they're threatened by it. And I've talked some other people I've interviewed. They had some really cool thoughts about artificial intelligence and machine learning. But I'm actually really excited about where AI and machine learning are going. I think it's just the people behind those ideas and people behind the AI development and logic. I think it's always about who's building it and their intentions behind it. And it was pretty cool with Common talking about this in a commercial promoting Microsoft, I guess what they're doing in AI, and how he was saying, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to react to it? It was pretty cool the way he talked about it. And it had like the music in the background. And I just thought it was pretty cool. Like, you're not seeing too many commercials on that. And I liked how Microsoft was introducing that. I think it was really creative the way their sales and marketing team did that. But with that being said, I mean, do you feel like how do you feel artificial intelligence is affecting, your space? Do you think it's going to positively impact it, or what do you?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it will. I think it already is. I mean, the ad tech space is usually pretty forward on a lot of this stuff, and there's people out there using machine learning for optimizing algorithms and buying ads, and there's people pitching AI of different types, like whether they're genetic algorithms or what it is. There's a huge opportunity in the space for it, because a lot of this is around optimizing ads, right? Showing the right ad to the right person at the right time is a very computer solvable problem. So I think we will see a lot of big advancements in this space around that. And there's stuff where, they're talking about, Watson being used for some of this stuff. I haven't seen a lot of, I think I was at a conference not that long ago where people, were kind of like, how many people think AI is actually being used? And it was like 7 hands. And how many people think AI is like what the marketing department says is being used? And it was like 70 hands. So there's a lot of hype, and there's a lot of marketing wear right now. But I do think the reality, is that AI and machine learning will have a big impact on the advertising industry over the next 5 and 10 years.
Yeah. Are you guys going to incorporate any AI algorithm or logic, or how there's Google TensorFlow, right? I mean, are you going to incorporate anything?
Yeah,
into your
we've been
platform?
doing some digging into mainly machine learning and how we can help optimize ads. We've also done a little bit of testing around with genetic algorithms and using that to also optimize ads. One of the tough things is that advertising, unlike things like the stock market, is that it's hard to it's hard to run regressions going back because you don't actually know what would have happened if you showed this ad to a user. Unlike, buying and selling stock and things like that, where you can say, oh, if I had bought it, it would have gone up or would have gone down. There's some unique challenges in the ad space for that. So there's a lot of stuff to overcome, but yeah, we've been researching on both machine learning and genetic algorithms, and there is a lot of potential there around ad optimizations.
Cool. Yeah, that's great insight, James. Really appreciate that. I think a lot of people can really learn about I think the power of artificial intelligence, get a good understanding about it. And I think it's good you talking about it in your space as well. So, James, I want to talk a little bit about just in terms of giving some insight to future tech entrepreneurs. What do you think future leaders and entrepreneurs should really be aware of and avoid when they're starting a company? Any tips that you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're in a shift of a couple things, which is one, I think that now it's easier. When I think about when I started versus where it is today, we had I think a harder time building the product because we didn't have as many tools available as there are today. When you look at like what's available from Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and what technologies or tools or open source, it's only becoming easier and easier to build a product, right? To build a SaaS product. The thing that's I think is becoming exponentially harder is to actually get attention and to get users of that product. And so I think that's the part that people still undervalue. They think about, if I build this product, it's like the Field of Dreams thing. If I build this product, people will come. Nobody's going to show up. Like, it's harder and harder, right?
You have to know how to market it.
Yeah, it's harder and harder to get that out there. So I think that more and more now, it's building the company is almost more about how are you going to get people aware of this? How are you going to get people to try it? How are you going to get people to sign up for it and pay for it and use it? Than it is about actually building the product. And I think, it's always been an important part, but I think the pendulum is moving and which is harder. And I think now it's actually harder to get out there. I mean, when you look at Product Hunt or something, there's dozens of products launching every day. And while it's a momentous event to you when you launch their product, to me, like, I'm not going to hear about it, right? Like, it's like you're maybe going to hear about a couple products a week, and even that is probably too much for most people. So I think having a plan and understanding how you're going to get people to use this product, or pre-selling it, right? Like finding people before you even build it that agree to buy it, is the hardest part now. And I think that's where, if I think that, people who can build software, are incredibly valued right now. Engineers are really well paid. Like, I think the only people who are paid more, or will be paid more soon, are the growth people who know how to actually get the word out about that product. That's not just, throwing millions of dollars at AdWords or something like that, because anybody can do that.
Yeah. It's finding strategic marketers, people to actually get your product adopted, and people to actually engage in your product and essentially purchase it, buy, right? Getting buyers, customers. So I definitely agree with that. I've spoken to so many, over the years, so many different startups. Everyone has these ideas, right? Everyone has this idea, and they think that just because they develop a product, they think that people are just going to engage with it and they're going to make money straight away. And I think I think the problem in our economy now, or I think even just around the world, is very high expectations too quickly. These instant gratification. You hear a lot about that, right? Instant gratification. They want a quick return, and people are not willing to be patient. They're not willing to plan ahead and be strategic in their not only their product development, but in their sales strategies and their marketing, right? And I think that's essential. And it seems like that's what you guys did. And I read about you, James, and your company, and I saw like how planning and patience played a vital role in AdsERK. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things there, right? So I think that one of the things that you see a lot of people do is they too quickly shift from thing to thing, from idea to idea. And I think that I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. And it's something that I've had to work a lot on my personal patience. Where you come up with an idea, you have something you want to ship, you want to do it. We quickly, in today's day and age, like we want to stare at real-time graphs of Google Analytics or, real-time graphs of Stripe and see money come in. But it takes a lot longer, especially, at least for us, it's taking a lot longer, right? This is all just personal experience. I'm sure some people launch right. something and immediately see it go crazy. But when it comes to AdsERK, especially when you're selling to, enterprise companies, there's a lot of patience in working with these companies over the months and getting them set up and getting them to be successful. And so everything, it is very much, you're firing a cannon shot and you have to wait 3 months to see if it lands. So there's a lot of patience involved in that. And I think, and when it comes to planning, like we're, I wouldn't say we're the best planners in the world, but I think we have, we planned out a vision of what we do. And while we change a lot around how we might fulfill those goals, we've had, we're pretty steady in what we believe that we should be doing. I'm a big fan of the idea of the flywheel, right? And so that's from the book Good to Great, like the Jim Collins book, where he talks about, good companies, like they start a flywheel moving in one direction and they keep it moving in that direction. And then eventually the flywheel picks up momentum and you couldn't stop it if you wanted to, or it's really hard to stop it. And so, years ago, we decided that we had core goals, which were to help publishers and e-commerce sites to make money, right? And our other core goals was to make the internet a better place, right? To replace crappy flash banner ads with, high quality native ads. And those things haven't changed in, 4 or 5 years since we came up with that. And so we've been pushing that flywheel, and sure, like maybe we change because, we built an API for a different platform, or we realized that, this type of customer is slightly better for us than another type of customer, or we could change a whole backend technology. All of the implementation can change, but, the general idea and what we've planned for all along is what's, paying off, right? Getting that flywheel moving and keeping that flywheel moving.
Right. With all that being said, and I love it, I think that's great. With all that being said, do you feel that, you being an entrepreneur, you having all this experience now, in our economy now, do you think it's harder to start a company, or you feel it's easier? From what I'm hearing, it's easier because there's a lot more tools, there's a lot more resources now. But I've heard from some really successful people that it's harder.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that I think that it's dramatically easier to start a company. I think it's dramatically harder to become successful. So, it's a question is, if it's getting to a couple customers, couple paying customers, and building the product, getting to a couple paying customers, I think that's easier than it ever was before. I think rising above the noise and building a meaningful company is harder than it ever was before because of how easy it's gotten to be to start it. When you talk to guys who started companies back in the 90s, it was like you literally needed millions of dollars to buy hardware to make a website, right? So just, or like not a website, but like a real destination site, like a pets.com or something like that, right? Like there wasn't, nowadays, like I can go start pets.com in 25 minutes with a Shopify account, right? Like I could literally just pull stuff off of Alibaba and put it into Shopify and call it pets.com if I had the domain name, and I'm done. So you go from a company needing, $20 million of Sun and Oracle servers and developers and all this kind of stuff to 25 minutes. And so, it's easier than ever to launch this stuff. The hard part is how, would anybody come to my site? No, right? Like, how would I get people to my site? Like, I'd have to be an expert in SEO or marketing, or I'd have to have built a brand, or I'd have to have, be an influencer, or I'd have to, come up with a really great marketing plan to launch this thing. So you think about it, like the hard part now isn't launching the e-commerce site; it's making it successful. The hard part now isn't building the SaaS app. You could go build a SaaS app for dentists. If you had a dentist buddy who told you what they needed. The hard part would be how are you going to sell that to the 700,000 dentists or whatever it is across America? So I think that in some ways it's a lot easier to launch it, and in a lot of ways it's a lot harder.
Yeah, that's why you hear a lot about hard work plus consistency. It's okay to make a lot of mistakes, right? But at least you're trying new methods and strategies. If you fail at it, it's okay. I mean, just keep trying and keep moving forward. Like you were talking about the wheel, right? Keep moving forward and trying new things, and eventually you're going to find something that works. And I think those are those are the people that make it. Is over time, they stay consistent with it and they don't give up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
the core.
Yeah, that's the key part about trying something different, right? Because like there's a difference between trying a bunch of things and there's a difference between trying a bunch of things with the same goal, right? Like I think, and that's where it's easy to get distracted, where it's not, a flywheel is going in the same direction, and if what you're trying is totally different things every 2 months, then you're not going in the same direction. You're trying lots of things in different directions, and that you'll never get momentum going, right? So it's all about having clarity of focus and clarity of like what the value you want to provide is, and trying different things to get to that. Whereas when you have people that just go in 100 different directions, where it's a totally different value they're providing different places, like that's where you can get into a lot of trouble.
Cool. Yeah, James, this is all great. Really appreciate it, man. So I always, to cap things off, I always ask the 3 hows. So how do you define failure? How do you define entrepreneurship? And how do you define success?
Yeah. So how do I define failure? So I would define failure as doing the same wrong thing again. I think it's like I'm totally okay with doing something and failing at it and learning, or not being successful, right? Like, so trying something, not being successful, having it not work, and learning the valuable lesson from that. Failure is when you try something and you fail and you don't learn anything from that. And so you either do it again or you don't get any value out of it, right? If we look at this as a set of experiments, as long as we get, understanding from that experiment, it was valuable. If AdsERK shut down tomorrow, I wouldn't consider it a failure because, I've learned a tremendous amount. We've delivered a tremendous amount of value to a large number of customers and, and employees and people like that. That I think it would not be a failure because we have learned so much. Now, if I went and started another company, did the exact same thing and failed the exact same way, that would absolutely be a failure, right? Like, because we wouldn't have learned anything we wouldn't have taken anything we learned from AdsERK. Then we look at that internally too, right? Like if we try selling to a new type of customer, we try, retrofitting our product for a different group. If it doesn't work, that's okay. We learn that doesn't work, that wasn't the right move. But if we keep trying to do the same thing, or we push it for too long, or we spend too long before we realize it's not going to work, then that can be a failure. And then, how do you define entrepreneurship? I think it's an interesting question. I think that it really just comes down to me, I'm kind of a purist in that I think it's launching a company. It's starting something on your own from scratch and building something out of nothing. I think that's entrepreneurship. I have a hard time swallowing like entrepreneurship inside of Fortune 500 companies and things like that, because I think if you're not ever at least once afraid of if you're going to get paid next week, like it's hard to call it entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And then, how do you define success? I think, there's a lot of different metrics, I guess. But to me, it's about creating value. It's about creating value for other people or for other companies or for, yourself or for your investors. That's kind of the name of the game, right? Like everything we do is to try to create value. Even if you're in a nonprofit, right? Like your goal is to create value. So I think success is just creating value. And part of that is, learning, right? Learning is very valuable. So I think, as long as we're creating value in the world, then I think we're being successful.
Love it. Love it. So James, where can everyone find you? Social handles, website?
Yeah. So I'm, AdsERK.com, obviously for the company. I'm on Twitter as Avery J. Also on Medium as Avery J as well. And I think that's about it.
Awesome. James, thank you so much, man. Thank you. Really, really appreciate you being with me here today. And it was great. I think people can learn a lot from this. And again, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to Tales from the Pros. And this is Michael Giorgio, your host. Thank you, guys. Take care. Hey, guys. Thanks a lot for watching Tales from the Pros. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and also follow our social media. There are links somewhere around here, but we really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for all the support, and I'm going to be giving you awesome content continuously, and we look forward to seeing you soon.